welcome everybody back to the Indie Inkwell. My name is JJ. I'm one of your co-hosts. Today, my normal co-host is not with me. Michael is not available to us today. The Air Force has taken him away from us once again. However, we do have a returning guest host and a former guest with us to help out. We've got Nerdtween, Kyle Goodman. What's going on, man?
Oh, just another glorious day in paradise. I mean, anytime you get a chance to talk comic books, I'm here for it.
100%. And we are going to go ahead and skip our sponsor spot today since Longbox is not here with us. So let's just bring in our guest. He is the writer and creator of not only Shadows, but one of the books he's here to discuss today, Hyperforce. Give it up, everybody, for Adam Matthew Smith. What is going on with the
Woo!
format today?
How's it
Everybody's
going?
getting switched around. Let me see if we can fix this up here. There we go.
Where am I moving?
What's going on, Adam?
How are you? How are you guys doing?
Good.
Doing pretty good.
So this is the second time I've interviewed you. First time was for a different show, different company.
Yeah.
So, but for those who have not seen that first interview, why don't you kind of give us your origin story? How did you originally get into comic books and just being a nerd in general? And then how did you kind of find your way into making your own comic books?
Okay. Sure. So I came up with these characters originally for these books in the 90s when I was just a child. So they were kind of half-baked ideas that I revisited more recently and have added a more adult touch to.
Yeah, I would definitely say more adult for sure.
Yeah, but it's basically a post-superhero future. So it is in the superhero realm, but not necessarily a superhero story. So these are really just like rebel people with heightened abilities and special abilities who aren't superheroes by any means, but they're trying to kind of restore balance because the government's currently taken over the power and is killing their kind off and enslaving them. And no one's really doing anything about it. There aren't many left, so they're kind of taking it upon themselves to, level the playing field.
Yeah, and we will definitely get further into both of Shadows and Hyperforce here shortly. So when you were first kind of getting into comic books, was there like a particular publisher that you really gravitated towards, or was there a particular writer or artist that you really liked?
Oh yeah, there are several.
I was saying,
So,
I know one for sure was probably Todd McFarlane's Spawn, because I know you've mentioned
Mhm.
Spawn a couple of times.
yeah, Spawn's great. Really, I started with DC and the love for Batman and Robin and that whole like Bat family early on before I think they were even called the Bat family.
Right.
But they still were the Bat family, right? But yeah, so that's really how I got into comics. And at that time, in the mid 90s, late 90s, X-Men was happening. Spider-Man was like a cartoon. The comic was like really popular at the time. And, back when we were younger, and I'm older than you guys, it wasn't cool to be into comics. So you kind of had to like hide your.
Oh, it wasn't cool when we were in school either, man.
Yeah. Had to hide your hobbies kind of thing. But I loved it. And my best friend and I would go like rollerblade to the comic shop and pick up like a DC title or Marvel. There were several Marvel titles we loved, but long story short, when Image came out, we were like, wowza. It was Todd McFarlane, but it was definitely, Rob Liefeld, Jim Lee, like all these people who had migrated over to Image Comics, and that it was creator owned. So it was like way more outside of the box.
Mhm.
And I understand. I know the arguments that some of those comics don't have the same density, I guess, story wise as some of the
But
other.
you have to think of it too. It was mostly artists back then that went and
Yeah.
started Image. So you've
Right.
got longtime artists that are now trying to be writers, and they've never
Right.
done that before.
And I think
So
that was part of the appeal, though, is because it was
Yeah.
just a very visual experience, and they were really trying to push their limits and do things that those, the big two wouldn't let them, kind of in some ways. So it was really inspiring as a kid, to see that and be like, hey, I want to do this. And just a side note, not about Image, but so some of these characters, I was looking back through them for a little video I was making and seeing like when I created some of these. I created at least two of them the same year Deadpool was created.
Oh wow, really?
It's been that long. So yeah, I see Rob Liefeld is retiring from Deadpool, and I'm just getting started with Kitsune. So
You can definitely see similarities of those characters. No, I really liked hearing that story, and like when I read the stuff that was provided, and it just showed some of the images from the original drawings from the '90s that when you did them when you were a kid, that resonated with me because my book I wrote the first half of it 10 years ago.
wow,
And now I'm retooling it for a comic book. So like that's I like seeing, and that's the thing you mentioned with Image. It was this brave new world where the sure maybe all the stories weren't great, but it was something that was so loved by so many because it was something new, and it was like you said, you push the envelope. You can do things on independence that you just can't do in
right?
the big two, and no matter who you are, you still can't do them,
You kind
so
of
And at
make
the
your own
time,
rules more
like
so. Yeah.
Marvel and DC were on like a very repetitive streak.
they still are. I'm sorry. I,
I was gonna
excuse
try to
me.
leave that alone and sidestep it, but
uh,
but yeah, I mean, I think it was just a different time, and when Image came around, it was needed
yes. Oh
badly.
yeah.
When
Yeah.
you see a second coming of that right now with Distillery, like Distillery is Image 2.0, but better
Well,
because you got some of the best writers
And
along for the ride
artists.
too.
and
Like,
the distillery is awesome. Like that's so exciting. But I'd say in general, like the indie comic scene is making it much easier for indie artists to break out and do
absolutely,
things, smaller titles, because even though it was a creator owned label, Image was still huge artists who were already known from
Mhm.
these other labels, and now it's possible for more people on a lower less known level to break in. So
yep.
in general, indie comics, golden age.
So,
No,
would you say
definitely.
like those guys from Image were probably your major influences when you started trying to like really seriously do this on your own?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I mean, I always loved as I got into it more. Yes, Todd McFarlane was definitely one. I used to love or still do Frank Miller,
Mhm.
Alan Moore, like those kinds of guys, writers and artists from Dark Horse and
And I don't even consider those guys just comic book writers either. Like
no,
those
no,
are
absolutely not.
literary artists. You know,
Absolutely,
Yeah,
the way I look at it. Like those
100%.
guys
absolutely.
can craft a story with so few words. It's insane.
Absolutely, I agree. Yeah, and I
It's not even
actually
fair putting them on a comic, like because it's like you don't even need a lot of words sometimes in comics. Then these are the master smiths of using as little words as possible to tell a
storytelling.
great story. It's like
Yeah, absolutely.
ta-da, kismet.
Yeah, I took a BBC Maestro, the BBC Maestro course for Alan Moore, and it was really great about storytelling, just kind of breaking down like the do's and don'ts, and as far as he's concerned, and like what he kind of
Right.
advises. It was awesome.
But I mean, shoot, if you're gonna listen to anybody, I mean,
He's the man. Yeah,
you can pick worse people to read to for sure, or
sure.
to listen to.
Listen to, yeah, for sure. Um, but yeah, that was pretty much it. As I kind of like came back around to it. I was doing music for years, and and I think it was 2016 was the year, but I kind of picked up some old stories that I had written, and at that point I consider myself a songwriter because I was into music for over a
Mhm.
decade in bands.
Hmm.
But as I was looking through some of these old stories, I'm like, I'm a storyteller in general. Like, I'm not gonna like box myself into just like writing music and lyrics kind of thing. Like, this has always
Right.
been here.
Yep.
That was my original dream. So I'm gonna try to like, music's kind of coming down for me. I'm gonna like jump to this old ship and see what's left here. So I dug out some buried treasures to stick with the metaphor.
No, 100%. And those characters that you came up with as a kid in elementary school are now full-blown comic characters.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
there they are. And yeah, that's from Shadows. So Hyperforce is minus Alexander for reasons, but yeah, it's still the other characters have kind of merged over from there. So Hyperforce kind of picks up like 1 year after Shadows is over, around that time. I get kind of vague with time because I don't want pin like a specific,
Yes.
like I don't want to Back to the Future that stuff, you know. So
Right. Well, because you leave yourself open for a lot of plot holes doing that. You know, what
right,
if you forget something or use a date and then never talk about that event again because it's not
right.
relevant anymore? Somebody is going to be like, well, what happened with this? You know, they're going to be
Yep.
pounding on
Yep.
the table. Like, I want this figured out. What happened here?
Right. Well, that's true, but also I just in general I don't want to with this specific story like there's hover cars, there's holograms, there's all sorts of stuff that we imagine in the future, but like I said Back to the Future, like, you know, in 2015 there were hoverboards and stuff and now we're like, really? You know, but I don't
Right.
want that to be where it's like it's still a great movie for sure, but I don't want us to look back at Hyperforce or Shadows and be like this was like 2030, yeah, right, you know, like or something like that. So it's kind
Right.
of just in the not too distant future.
Yeah. Well,
No,
that's
that's the
smart. I mean,
best way to do it. You leave yourself
sometime
a lot of
later,
room.
or you use specific words like sometime later or meanwhile instead of saying exact
Exactly.
times,
I
just
use
to
that,
stay
yeah.
safe.
It's true
I
though.
don't think I've ever read a comic that didn't use that, though. I mean,
It's true.
unless they are trying specifically to be like very, very exact in everything,
Right.
which
Right.
some are, but
Yeah.
I
It's
think
true.
those are the ones that are hyper criticized as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the more you put into it, and this is something I heard Stan Lee say a long time ago, is like do something that you know a lot about or that nobody can prove. You know, and that's like the pseudoscience
Mm,
aspect of it. So it's like you don't want to do anything like too much that people can prove because then they're like the plot holes that you're talking about. But if you make it a lot more like pseudo like vague-ish, then it's harder for people to you know punch holes in that.
right. Like if you say a specific year, like say you said 2030 or 2035 or whatever it was, and you know, the technology looks like it should be like 400 years from what we have now.
Right, exactly.
Somebody's gonna be like, there's no way we're gonna have that in 10 years. Like
Right, absolutely.
so one thing I noticed when you sent me this is you've got a new artist working on Hyperforce.
Yes, and he
So
is
I don't want to
awesome.
pry into anything if there was like some kind of drama or falling out, but is there a reason you went with a different artist this time around or
Well, I kind of wanted to bring more of the cyberpunk feel to it
okay.
because it is kind of a cyberpunk backdrop, and you get that from Shadows for sure.
Hmm.
But actually, the artist for Hyperforce is good friends with the cover artist from Shadows. So I was like
Ah,
looking into like doing more of a push towards cyberpunk than like a more traditional look. And the artist Machismo of the cover artist of Shadows was like, "Hey, I got this friend who really loves cyberpunk, and you know he's looking for you know something to get involved in right now." So I was like, "Well, let's talk." But this is
yeah.
all through. This is cool because this is all through like Instagram. You know, like this is like just meeting
Hmm.
people on TikTok and Instagram, and it's
That's how I
super.
got my artist. I mean,
Yeah,
I've been
That's
following
how
my
I
artist for
met him.
years.
That's how I met you was
on TikTok.
through
Yeah, yeah,
TikTok. I mean, we've had plenty of guests on here that we met through Facebook groups. So I mean, use social media. I know some of you are scared of it, but just use it.
it's your friend. Yeah, got to utilize the tools.
If it's
Yeah.
gonna be there and it's open and free to use, then I don't.
Whether you like it or hate it, it's what it is.
Yeah,
that's,
and you might
that's
as
kind
well
of
use
how
it to
I
your
feel about it.
advantage.
Like,
Well, there's so many negatives, so why not do some positives with it? Yeah.
Exactly. That's what
yeah,
we're trying to do with this show. You know, I mean, there's a lot of shows that go over the big Marvel guys or the big DC guys. I want to, you know, Image and on down. I want
Yeah.
to see the creator own stuff. I want to see the
Let's
stuff
go.
nobody's heard of.
Yeah.
well, I've seen not only with, I mean, to my own horn here, but my own work, but anyone who is not part of those big groups, they know that they got to tell the best story possible and have the best art and best everything, or else it's not going to have a chance. You know, and the big ones, the DC and Marvel, they can throw 35 different runs of Spider-Man at the wall until something sticks because
Right.
they can. But if you put out issue one of your indie comic and no one likes it, there probably isn't going to be an issue two.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Spider-Man's like their Mickey Mouse, so you know you can have plenty of iterations of that, and it's still okay. But
Well, the one thing I do, I've been so like off superhero comics because of Marvel and DC personally. And I have found that the indie superhero esque genre is still fascinating. Like this book was very superhero esque,
Yeah.
but it had this
It
this
had a lot more
cyberpunk. It
X-Force
had
vibes to me than
yes,
than a superhero story necessarily.
Yes.
right, but you can still have enhanced
Couches
characters.
included.
Like but you had these advanced characters, who could do all these crazy things, and I've just been veering away more towards horror as of late because that's where the good stories are. But like, look at like these powers and then these individuals, because you did a really good job at having these different characters seem like different characters on the page. Because a
Thank
lot
you.
that's I think that's lost in a lot of some indie creators because it's just words on a page and not characters talking.
Yeah, it
It's
feels
true.
like just the same person talking with a different face on each
Yeah.
dialogue
No,
bubble.
I hate that actually. I don't like reading that kind of stuff.
I would say I don't think anybody tries to do that. I think
No,
it's
for
Yeah.
more
sure.
of just either they're too eager to get it out before they really read through and look at it, or they just don't have the experience of writing yet.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess when I approach the characters, it's really about any line that I write down. I kind of assign it to a character, right? Or even sometimes if I'm like, getting a coffee or something, and I think some funny thing or some serious thing, then I'm like, oh, this person would say this, And I'm kind of like always like categorizing things I'm saying and other people are saying as like, oh,
Hmm.
this is totally something like Fume would say or Kitsune would say. So like, it helps when I
Still,
sit and
Fume is
write
my
it.
favorite character still.
Fume, awesome. He's fun. But then like I sit down and write it, and then I'm like, oh, this is obviously what this person would say in this situation, because I have so many like examples from real life of what I've kind of delegated to them.
Hmm. Well, it's got to be tough trying to keep all those different because, like, for me, I'm my writing. I have two main characters and then a slew of other characters. You've got an entire team, multiple teams actually, really, that are all co-mingling in this same world. It's got to be tough. Can you speak on how how hard that might be to keep all the different personalities straight?
Well, like I said, they've all been up here since the 90s.
So that helps. The
And there's
minor
plenty of time to
obsession
marry 'em.
helps.
Yeah, absolutely. No, but it's, I think just totally like dedicating to something, like sitting down and it's like if I'm writing for a character, then I'm thinking about that character and what they do, like how they breathe, how like what kind of would they drink tea or coffee, that kind of stuff, just to like
Mhm.
really help me solidify the character profile, so not just like what would this person say, what color do they wear, like, but like like what would they drink, what would they, any level of detail.
The little kind of stuff that you don't know unless you actually get to know a person.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, and that helps me know them personally, so then I can easily, because like people that personally, your family or close friends, you're like, oh, this he would totally say that, or he
Yeah.
would love this,
Right,
or she
or
would
like,
love
oh,
this.
Yes.
that's so and so's brand of cigarette, or that's
Exactly.
so
So
and
that's
so's brand
kind
of
of
whatever.
exactly. So I'm trying to like they're my friends in a way. Like I'm like I love them all. They're my little children.
Well, I mean, they're characters you've lived with basically for the last, what, 30 years?
Yeah,
So
yeah. So yeah, and
it
even
makes
if I
sense.
wasn't like focusing on it, they were always in my head at some
Yeah.
level, in the back. So I just pulled them out of the closet and gave them a big hug.
Now, I
I
did
like
see
that.
something new in Hyperforce. You've kind of introduced a particular government group, it looks like.
Yes.
So
So
can
this
you give us a little bit more detail on this? Because I don't want to spoil stuff, so I kind of want you to explain.
sure, sure.
That way, if we spoil something, it's your fault.
Fair, fair. I might spoil it and not realize it, but so this is
Well, here we
basically
can boom, spoiler warning,
spoiler
everybody.
warning.
You have been warned.
So at the end of Shadows, the president who's currently in office is no longer in office, and the vice president actually becomes the monster. So we're without some sort of leader in our country. So there's a new president who I actually haven't mentioned yet, but there's a new president who's taken over, and instead of having like a judge in the Supreme Court, there's this panel of corporate silhouettes who now judge everything, and they are not friends of Hyper Sapiens, who are the superpowered people in this universe. So
Basically, the equivalent of metahumans for DC fans out there.
yeah, exactly. So they are harshly judging everybody, especially if they find any sort of, reasonable doubt. And so this character here in Court Crimson is somebody who you saw like a blip of in Shadows, but he's going to be one of the main characters.
I thought I'd seen him before.
Yeah.
But like you said, it was just for a split second.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, that was really to just kind of like plant a little seed so they can come back to him later, which they do in this first issue. I kind of had the idea for Hyperforce when I wrote Shadows, and I was trying to like get to it. But the reason I did Shadows as a graphic novel is because so people could see the full story without having to wait for an issue and kind of get the whole background. So when I put this out as a series, they at least have like
an understanding of like who the characters are,
exactly.
what the plot is.
Yeah. So I try to recap that a little bit in the first couple pages, just to like.
And you do a pretty good job.
You
too,
did a very, very good job, because I didn't read Shadows.
Because I know Kyle didn't read Shadows, so if he was caught up and understood everything, I'd say you did a good job.
Yeah, right. Just the first couple of pages definitely picked me right quick into what the whole situation was. I may not have known every single character, like that obviously would have been a little lost on me, those things, but like. I come to learn these characters and enjoy them for just what I saw here, and that's why I mentioned it earlier. That they all seem like really individual characters, and they're so awesome. And you can see the Image influence with the grittier like violence. The way it wasn't just gratuitous violence, but it was great.
Purposeful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And, honestly, I have to attribute some of the character differences to Alejo's drawing, too, because he really gave each of their faces, like, their very own characters. So it's not, in some comic books, like, every female looks alike with different colored hair. Every male looks alike with different colored hair, different hairstyle, whatever.
Yeah.
But in this, like, they all have different eyes and noses and face shapes. And he really, like, gave them their characters and
you can see that pretty well on the left side of the images we've got up here for our YouTube viewers.
Yes.
Audio listeners, check us out on YouTube if you want to see all the screenshots for everything. But you can definitely tell because everybody does. They have a very distinct facial structure. Like it's not just copy and paste people.
Yeah. And I love that. I really appreciate that he took the time and detail on that. But I guess as Shadows also is more of like a bigger picture story. One of the criticism I got from Shadows was basically that it took a minute to kind of amp up to all of the intense stuff. And this is just kind of like you're right in it.
Yeah.
And it's a zoom in on the characters. It's not just like an overall like a big story. It's like this smaller zoom in to like the personalities that interpersonal.
Right. Well, and I mean, I think people have to learn that, especially with like a bigger graphic novel, because yours wasn't a small graphic novel. It was over 100 pages.
The big, it's 140.
Yeah. So I mean, it took me a little while to read it, and it didn't hurt to read it. So
that's good.
Sometimes when you're trying to read through something quick for an interview, it's like, oh, come on.
Yeah.
Like, but no, it wasn't like that with Shadows. And I think people need to learn a little bit more patience, especially when it comes to a brand new series that's trying to world build.
Right.
Yeah.
Like you got to give the creators a chance to actually give you the world and present everything that's going on in order to understand what's going to happen next.
I agree. I mean, I get their point though. I mean, it takes a minute to get in. I try to get into it as fast as possible, but I can get a little wordy. So,
right. But like I said, personally, I didn't see an issue with it.
Okay.
But I understand that most people's attention spans these days are about 30 to 40 seconds. So, yeah. Yeah.
When you're trying to tell a good...
One of the many downsides of social media is that it has shrank our attention spans.
Yeah.
When you're trying to tell a good story, though, you can't just throw action on the first page and expect them to ever want to read anything. So if you're going to write a story that has where you have to have characters talk and have explanations of things, you got to start early and let them know this is the vibe of the book. Like
Mhm.
you can't just expect all this action and no world building. And I
Well, and it's
definitely
just
agree with
like with your
JJ.
ash can for Here Walks Monsters, Kyle. It took a few pages to start amping up a little bit, but once it did, it put you right where you wanted to be. You know, but you
I feel
have
like
to
it's
let
necessary to do
people
that.
let their world build. Like, you
Mhm.
have to let people do that. You can't expect every comic book to just insert you straight into the middle of the action. You're not I mean, people want to read a story sometimes.
Well,
Yeah.
I tried to do the bait and switch with Shadows, where the first page really was just like the Superman figure of that world has been assassinated,
Mhm.
essentially, and you're like, "Whoa, this is intense!" And then all of a sudden, it's like, "And here's all the exposition."
Right.
Like,
Right, and a
gotcha.
lot of news broadcasts, a lot of,
Yeah.
explanation on how things are the way they are, and
Right,
but
right.
you need that kinda stuff.
And
I
I
mean, yeah, I
definitely
guess you
think,
could sprinkle it into issues throughout or whatever, you can use flashbacks back and forth, but I always, I find that usually confusing to me when I'm
yeah,
reading through something, especially if they do it in separate issues.
Yeah.
I think the best way to do expository, you know the word I'm trying to say, dumps is through like a news bulletin or things like that, because that is what that literally is them telling you what happened and explaining the situation. So it doesn't take the reader out because they're looking at it going, oh, it's a news broadcast. Okay,
Right,
there we go.
right.
You're still
Exposition.
immersed
See, I
into
can say
that
it.
world because you're maybe watching it on that character's television screen that's happening.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And that's actually something I plan to do more with Hyperforce than I did with Shadows, is make media in general, social media and that kind of stuff, be more of a center of information being given, where it's like either it's news, which is not a new idea, but also having stuff like a TikTok type thing or Instagram type thing
Mhm.
running, and you see these people, with their different opinions online and
Right,
all
and as the
that.
story progresses, they kinda, like, the
Right.
opinions start changing and stuff like
Yeah.
that. No, that's really dope, like, because there's a lot of books I've read recently have tried to, like, incorporate social media elements into it to where it's like, there's like you described almost, like, the only one I've seen do it well, though, so far is Radiant Black's team.
Okay.
Radiant Black, yeah, they did a really good
They are the
job.
only ones I've seen do it actually well, where it didn't feel like it was being used as a plot device.
Okay.
Like, it's
I'll
just part of the world, you know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? Like,
yeah, that's important. I haven't checked that out. I'll have to check that out. But yeah, that's kind of more the idea I had, is not like you're saying, doesn't take you out just because it's news. It's like here's a news broadcast, by the way. It's just kind of like
right,
something that's happening in their world, and you just happen to catch that.
like characters scrolling through their phone or something, and, "Oh,
Right.
yeah, okay, the comments
Exactly.
are showing that," like,
Yeah. Exactly.
not to
So
put too many ideas out there for everybody to take, but,
Hey, let's
I
keep
don't
those
make
to
comic
ourselves.
books, so
Write that
but
down.
you've
Say
got
that. Can
a,
you go that, do that one more time? Say that again. Like,
you've got another book that you sent to us. A quick is I'm not sure if it's a one shot or if it's kind of like an ash can, kind of like a tester.
it's kind of a tester. Yeah.
Okay,
I
but
mean,
I enjoyed it, and you said it was geared a little towards the younger crowd, but not kids, definitely still.
yeah,
But
like a young
that
adult
is
audience.
the Nocturnal Rabbit guy. Kind of talk about this and what inspired you to do this, because it kind of expands on the whole Hyperforce universe.
It
mhm.
does. So basically, Nocturnal Rabbit Guy follows an 8-year-old kid named Javarius, who's living in Chicago, and he's not having the greatest life, kind of thing. And really, it really focuses on bullying and
Hmm.
that kind of theme. But he's very inspired by Hyperforce, and he wants to be one of them, or he wants to be brave like the Hyperforce rebels. So he sees them; they're kind of like his idols, but he's keeping it all very closeted. So he is not comfortable, like, showing that he's a hyper sapien. He'll kind of do it at night. So he has a mom who works overnight, and he kind of does that stuff when she's at work.
And boy, does he do it,
Mhm.
because I don't know many kids, even with superpowers, that would do this. Like, he goes out and stops robbery, like He's like, "Yep, I'm gonna just go handle business tonight because I'm not having a good day." Like,
I think the term they're using is standing on business now, I believe.
oh, is that what it is now?
I don't know. I'm assuming.
Taking care of business, handling business, standing on business, whatever you want to call it. He doesn't play no games. How's that?
I like that.
And that's by another artist, Jeremith VM, who's an excellent artist as well. And so he's doing that, and he's also working on actually a Hyperforce Christmas issue. So that's going to be coming out at some point. I've got all
No,
sorts
that's
of
awesome.
ideas here. But yeah.
So do you think with Nocturnal Rabbit Guy, are you gonna have that be like a kind of a ongoing for the young adult crowd if it takes off, or?
That's what I'm kind of hoping for. Yeah. I mean, I kind of wanted to test the water, see what people think, because I have a lot of ideas of like little side stories and things I can tell, even if they're like mini series, 5-issue, but yeah, I'm hoping that takes off. I've loved him for years. He was one of my later characters. He was around, I want to say the late 90s.
Okay, so this is also a character that you had
Yeah.
kind of in backlog.
Mm-hmm. There's
Okay, I was
more to
curious
come.
to that if this was like a new creation for the series that you came up with recently, or.
No, he's a character. So
Oh,
yeah.
awesome.
There's a whole little world there. Yeah. So I'm hoping to be able to, and you'll see some of these other characters come out through Hyperforce too. And something that I kind of wanted to do with Hyperforce in general is kind of show you where they stand morally and, with the law, like where they stand with the law and everything based on the interactions they're having, not just with good guys, the heroes, but like the villains and the also questionable people. So, kind of where they lie in that spectrum.
There's a lot of gray.
Yeah,
in
lots
this
of gray
in this
area.
issue for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so
Because one minute they are literally tearing, criminals apart, and then they're at a donut shop in the very next scene.
Right, they're not too worried about it.
Yeah, no, like not even phased a little bit. Like,
No, guy tries to hand his debit card, but it was covered in blood. They're like, "We can't take that; it's covered in blood." Oh, my bad. Here's my other one that's not
right.
covered.
I found it pretty funny that they
That was
didn't even
awesome.
question of like,
Right.
why is your card covered in blood? They're just like, we can't swipe that; it's covered in blood. Like,
So I actually based that little bit on when I used to be a barista, and there was a girl who came in and insisting a coffee, and she handed me this bill, and it was covered in blood. And I was like, I'm sorry, I don't feel comfortable touching that bloody dollar.
oh my god.
So that's actually based on a real story. But I
That's
was just thinking they wouldn't use cash in the future. They'd use so he's
Right.
like, oh, you just scan it anyway. So whatever.
Scan my handprint,
Yeah.
please.
right.
That's based on my experience as a barista, one of the many ones.
So I love that because I love it when a writer or even an artist takes little bits or little stories from their personal life and just kind of sneaks them into stuff, and it's like their own little inside joke to themselves. Like I love that.
Little pat on the back.
I don't think I've told anyone that story before.
Exclusive for the Indie Inkwell.
Exclusive.
Yeah, but
I know we need an air horn sound effect.
yeah.
There might be one in Restream, but I'm not going to sit here and cycle through sound effects right now.
30 minutes. Meanwhile,
Right.
A few moments later.
Right.
Yeah, moments
Where's the guy who does that voice?
Oh man. So is this gonna be you planning to do like a long run? Like is this 5 issues, 20 issues, 100 issues?
Well, when I first started talking about it, I was calling it a 20-issue arc, but since then I've revised my little file, my little Bible I've created for it, and it's going to be 10 issues. I'm going to keep it to 10 issues, see how it goes. That's a reasonable amount. So
you can always just start a new story arc if people like it enough to pick it back up.
Exactly. That's what I figure. I do this, and then I want to start. I have other things planned too after this happens. So 10 issues, I can wrap this up. I'm going to just move a couple things ahead and make it shorter and tighter and maybe more action packed. Who knows?
Well,
But
see, for all you impatient ones out there, then
but I do want to focus as I'm doing the zoom in. I want to not just make it like this big action thing. I want it to be, a bit gory, but also a bit more just focused on people and change and like personalities and just how they interact. So in general, I want that to be like characters interacting and
right, because you're already tackling some pretty heavy social issues,
Mhm.
like over control by the government, persecution of minorities. Yeah, I mean it's a pretty stark look at what it's like a reflection of what we deal with right now anyway.
yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
no, absolutely. And with it definitely has a lot of soul to it. Like it feels like an organism, like a living organism. It's not just a book on a page. Like it feels like this is we're looking at this world just in a different way. Like as if we
Nice.
can perceive their world, but they don't know we're watching. Like
Awesome.
definitely with the colors and the because I since I've started creating mine, like I like zoom in on like tiniest little details and like the silhouettes that you had on of the bad guys. It's such a great and simplistic touch. It makes them so menacing, and a lot of this is the little things that your book did really well. That
Thank you.
and like I said, I've been moving away from any type of superhero style, and this kept me in the entire. Was it 38 pages? I think it was
Yeah, yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I
something
think
like
it was
that.
38. Yeah.
I was like, "Whoa, okay." And like I didn't want to put it down. A lot of the superhero stuff, I'm like,
I was gonna
all
say
right, they
for
asked me to do a
context,
review. Let me
I
go
sent
ahead.
him the book less than what, an hour and a half ago?
Yeah,
Okay.
and I read both of them and was
Yeah.
ready to go. Like
Hell yeah.
it was really it's not one of those because I feel like a lot of people when if they're not already into indie comics, they just hear indie and think low value,
Yeah,
low quality.
they hear
This did
indie.
not
You
feel
say
like
indie, they
a indie
hear low
book.
budget.
Yeah. And this does not feel like an indie, like the quote unquote indie title. Like if it wasn't for Marvel and DC not accepting like unsolicited work, this story could fit in to one of those universes easily,
Awesome.
in my opinion, and it not be out of place. And for someone who's really over superheroes right now, I captivated from page one. I was like, oh damn,
Well,
okay,
honestly, this is kind of an answer to that, like what you're talking about, because I mean, we grew up loving superheroes, but everyone's pretty, superheroed out for the most part. So, like, as this story goes on, it's going to become less superhero-y and more cyberpunk, more like them dealing with
nice.
technology and like technology versus, natural ability and all of that. So,
I was
um,
gonna say the only real part of it that actually feels superhero-y in general is the fact that they have powers.
right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Other than that, it's more of like a team of vigilante mercenaries.
Basically, yeah. And honestly, down the road, their costumes are going to change too. So they're not even going to look as superhero-y. They're going to look a little more like in that world because they're
A
going
little
to
more
realize,
tactical rather than
right? Yeah, exactly. So that'll be
nice.
a switch down the line too. So yeah, it's kind of like I'm trying to blend genres a little bit to where it's like,
Yeah.
scratches that itch, but also moving away from, being fatigued.
No, you did a good job. No, I absolutely did a good job with that because it had that feeling. It definitely felt like an X-Force style story,
Hell yeah.
and I was hooked from the first
I would say,
page.
but a
So
fresh one. It didn't feel like a carbon copy of something I've already
right,
read a
right.
hundred times.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I'm gonna try to also, I guess, the Todd McFarlane influences. I'm going to add a lot more real world type aspects to it, like drugs and homelessness and things that people really struggle with that are real worldy, that aren't so like sparkly Hollywood.
Hmm.
So that's going to make it feel probably more real and based in like a reality. So
And it's not so like overly graphic either. I mean, you've got I don't know if I'm allowed to say this on YouTube or not, a schmex scene in it, but you don't show anything, and it's only like a panel. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not
yeah,
really even a scene. It's just
right.
But
It
no,
was
it was
implied there
done
was some magical
tastefully, and it's
wow.
hard to find that these days, especially on Kickstarter when there's just so much stuff that might as well just be porn.
I've seen that. Yeah, I think that's like it's a hub for that now. So.
That whole, but it's not just on Kickstarter. There's a
No,
whole
it's pretty
genre
much
now
any
It's
of
very
the people
yeah
who
very
just buy that stuff. I'm like when I used to do live shows, the people like, "Do you have this?" I'm like, I don't even know what that is. Okay, like I've been reading comics for 30 years. I don't know what you're talking about.
Sci-Fi Queens. Thank you very much. We appreciate that.
Oh, I can't see any of the comments. I don't know if anyone said anything.
Yeah, she said, "I'm new to your podcast, but I'm enjoying it. I found you on TikTok."
Nice.
Well, we
Nice.
appreciate it no matter how you
Nice.
got here. But so since I've got two comic book writers with me here, both of you, this is a question for what kind of advice would you give to the new writer, the first time writer who's never done this before?
I'm gonna go first, Kyle.
Um, I would say whether you want to or not, if you have that story, just start writing it. Whether or not you're gonna ever turn it into a book or a comic or a movie or whatever, just write the story. I mean, who if it doesn't turn out to be anything, you still got your story out for you. And if you then want to turn that into something else, more power to you. I just definitely just write. People to do art, like just start drawing, and then something will happen.
Yeah.
Just do it. Nike swoosh.
No, I would actually totally parrot what he's saying. That's basically the advice that I would give. Like a blank page, you'll get nothing from that. But if you write something down, if you just write something, then you can go back to that and change it, improve it. I mean, take me as an example. I wrote stuff down years ago, and I
Yep.
finally went back to it and was like, oh, but if I hadn't done anything, then I would be starting from scratch, or probably too discouraged to like want to start something like that. So just to start something, just do it, like you're saying, and you'll have something to work with. Play-Doh.
No, and another about being discouraged. You'll even no matter how successful you are, that's always going to happen. I mean, like I was talking to Alan Qua, who does a lot of work. I mean, he's a very popular artist, and he like did an exclusive cover for World Tree that I have, and he apologized to MegaCon. He was like, "Man, I'm sorry I couldn't do better." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, I needed more time. I think it could have been better. I'm like, "You gave us a gem." Like and so no matter how much success you have or anything like that, like the writer's block or being discouraged, that's always going to happen. You just got to work through it. I mean, it's not easy. I mean, I'm living proof. It is not easy. It took me 10 years to get my act together to finally get this comic book in
And
gear.
that was
But
just for the ash can.
yep.
Yeah.
But to be fair, the entire first issue's almost done
I
only
was
a
say
few
I'm
months later.
messing with
So
you, bro.
to
That's
be
awesome.
fair.
Yeah, I mean, it's an incubation process, right? You have to let the baby cook.
No, for sure.
Got a dark
And
mind. Sorry.
the one last thing I would say about that too, about what advice I would give, if you know people that are doing it, ask, ask for help, ask for advice. That's the one mistake I made early on, that I didn't ask enough people for their input and their advice. People I know and respect, they've done what I'm trying to do. Why did I not, seek them out to get some type of guidance? If you have any type of support system, let them support you. I mean, that's something
And
I'm beginning to learn as I go on. Like no one can do it themselves.
Right.
and I think that goes for anything you're trying to do, especially creatively. Like even if it's just like making videos or something, or running a podcast or anything. Like if you have people that actually care about what you do, then tell them what you're doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Let them support you
Right.
because the fear of judgment, I think, keeps a lot of people from doing things they want to try and do.
Yeah.
It's true. It's true. But a lot of people watch what you're doing and want to be doing what you're doing, maybe secretly, or are applauding you for actually being brave enough to do it, because it's not an easy road.
No.
No, I mean, especially like when you start doing a comic book, I'm sure you're like going into it, I'm gonna make a comic book. And then you realize, crap, now I have to be a marketer and a PR person and a talk show personality. And, like I have to do all this stuff.
It's true. And and it kind of goes back to what Kyle was saying before. Like, you have to basically love what you're doing, or that, like, if it doesn't happen, at least you still have that thing that you've done, right? So
Hmm.
that's, I think, what it really takes is to actually be into what you're doing, be passionate about it, love it, and you'll, no matter what, like, of course you have your goals, but even if you don't meet them, you have this thing that you've created, so.
Yeah. And sometimes that's enough. I mean, it really sometimes just getting it out is enough, and you don't. It may just be for your eyes only, and that's 100% fine, And then if you decide, no, let me retool it, let me do this, make it into a comic, make it into a movie. If it makes you happy, do it. But don't go into it thinking I'm gonna make a comic book and be rich, because it's just not gonna
God,
happen.
I love your voices, man.
I'd be interested to know if anyone actually thinks that, if they're going into comic books like, all the money.
Well,
I
I'll tell
I
you who
absolutely know of
does
a few.
get a lot of money support in the indie comics community are the guys that are doing the X-rated stuff for some reason. If you look on
Yeah,
some of those Kickstarter pages,
I've noticed
they
that
get funded
recently.
in like 30 seconds and they get funded for like
It's
$100,000
wild. Yeah,
Well,
for a
I've
movie
never looked
comic.
because
for that. So
I'm
sex sells.
like,
Sex sells. That's as simple as that. I mean,
yeah,
and especially in the generation that we're in right now, I like
I'll
the
say, not saying ours is any better.
it's the way I think the pandemic really switched a lot of people's thought processes,
Hmm.
and we're still seeing that because the people who are backing those Kickstarter campaigns can get all the stuff they want, and they don't have to go anywhere to get it. So they don't have to worry about the possible shame they might have. I'm not saying you should feel ashamed if you like that stuff, but I'm just saying that anytime you have to go out of the house, you might feel shame just for walking out the house. I know I do sometimes. I'm a round little hobbit walking out of my apartment complex. So you know what I mean. I'm just saying, like, you can get all this stuff sent right to your door, and you don't have to worry about any judgmental eyes. It makes sense. I mean, you can be that type of person
I didn't
and
even
get all
think
you want.
about it that way, but that does make sense as to why that stuff got so popular over the last few years.
First, they couldn't leave the house. Now they don't want to leave the house.
oh my gosh, it's
On
true.
that note,
I've seen
Adam,
that.
is there anything else you would like to plug? Where can people find you online, and where can people get a hold of Hyperforce or back it, or where can people find your stuff?
Okay. So I'm on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram at Adam Matthew Smith. So pretty easy, just my full name.
Same screen
And
name everywhere. I can attest to that because I had to find it all today.
and as far as Hyperforce, so it's actually on Kickstarter right now. It was fully funded, but any additional backings will go toward the art for issue 2.
Yeah.
So if you want to check out Hyperforce issue 1 on Kickstarter, there will be links in my bios. Also, you can just type it in on Kickstarter and you'll probably find it pretty easily. But oh,
There's
cool! He's
also a
got
QR code right there on the screen for everybody. If you would
sweets.
like to scan that, pause the
Perfect.
video if you need to. Scan that, you go back Hyperforce on Kickstarter. Or I don't believe the campaign started just yet, but you can follow it and get notified when it does launch.
Oh, it's launched. So
Is it
it's
launched?
yeah, it's
Okay.
completely launched. It's completely funded. It's just
Uh-oh.
Where did he go?
Adam, I think we lost you, buddy.
Adam! But while we're dealing with that,
While we're
the
dealing with
connective
technical
issue,
difficulties,
I want to say, if you're looking at someone's Kickstarter that is fully funded, don't just scroll on thinking, "Oh, they're fully funded." And I don't have a Kickstarter live right now, so this is not me trying to, get people to give me more money at this time. But every single penny that is given, it helps the creator, whether it's to make the next issue, hire the next artist, uh, even if it's to book the next appearance. I mean, every little bit counts. So if you think you're interested in it, don't just scroll by because it's at 100%. That's just a little cherry on the top for that.
There he is. Good timing, right when Kyle got finished talking.
Look at that. That was almost like we did that on purpose.
I can't hear you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you now. Yeah.
You can hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I can't hear you.
We were saying all we said was,
call
"Hey,
and
you
it
came
screwed the
back
whole
perfect
interview up.
timing because Kyle had just stopped talking." So like it was almost like we planned that.
I don't think he can hear us. So that
All right,
explanation you just gave him.
I can't hear you guys, so I'm gonna wave goodbye to everybody.
Okay, well, apparently Adam cannot hear anybody.
Be sure to go
So
to those,
thanks for hanging out
be
with
sure to
us.
go to those links. And yeah, the Kickstarter is Hyperforce issue 1, and any further pledges will go toward issue 2. So
There
I
it is.
appreciate
We'll
everyone
throw these
who's
QR
helping me on
codes
this
back up
journey,
on the
and I look
screen
forward
real
to
quick
seeing
for you
more.
guys. And yeah, make sure you go back Adam's stuff. He cannot hear us right now, so this should be fun. But we are gonna go ahead and thank everybody for hanging out with us tonight. Thank you, Kyle, for coming through and helping me
My pleasure.
co-host tonight. Adam, I know you can't hear me, but thank you for coming on the show. If we don't have a guest, we don't have a show. Thank you for everybody tuning in for the first time tonight. And as always, everybody, please be safe, be kind, and take it easy.